Hello viewers, well, it's that time again. It's a new Gran Turismo game, Gran Turismo 7. And it's 9 years since I covered Gran Turismo 6. A lot has changed in that time, but we're going to check it all out in this first look overview video. We're going to look at all the key aspects, or many of them, besides a little bit of discussion, and then there'll be more content to follow. But let's see what it's all about. So an incredible intro there, the energy, the vibe, it immediately brings back everything we love about Gran Turismo, the memories, the feeling of the game when it was originally released in Japan and now brought up to date with all the action, the crashes, the particle effects, the drifting, the energy, the music of Gran Turismo. It feels like a Gran Turismo game again. Where Gran Turismo Sport may have lost the elements that make everything of a Gran Turismo game, GT7 is finally the game you've all been waiting for, and we're going to go through it today and check out each and every part, and I'm going to give you some of my feedback and impressions on various elements as well. So getting stuck in then, we're off to Gran Turismo mode, and we need to unlock a few bits and pieces, but before that you'll start the game and you'll look at the music mode, which we'll show you a little bit of here while I'm talking. Little car driving round to some fun classical music. We're not going to play the classical music due to licensing issues with the music, but it's fun if a little random. I have to admit, the music mode still seems a little bit pointless at this stage, but either way, it's a nice introduction. Running on PlayStation 5, all the footage here is running on PlayStation 5, and it looks very impressive. A very shiny version of Gran Turismo, and everything's looking nice. We get stuck in, we have our intro, and then it's straight into the Gran Turismo mode. And like all Gran Turismo games, you start by just having a wander around, learning the basics of the map that's available to you. And initially, there's not much open. You have to unlock piece by piece. Go to the cafe. You'll get a menu. That menu will give you cars to unlock. You'll then go to the races, the World Series races, win those various races. That fills the menu, and then you'll unlock a bit of history on those cars, some lovely cutscenes, and then you'll receive another menu of other jobs that you are set to, or tasks you're set to achieve, and unlocking more cars, doing more races. When you go into each race, there is besides the race itself, there's a time trial, there's drift mode, there's circuit mode that you'll be familiar with in Gran Turismo Sport. So all the elements you're familiar with in Gran Turismo Sport are in there, and of course the traditional Gran Turismo elements. As you progress through the menus, you'll be unlocking more and more of the various features. And it wasn't entirely clear to me. I thought when I first went online that the game was going to be almost completely unlocked online, but it isn't. You need to go through quite a few different races before you get online. So we're going to come back to progression in just a moment. We start off in our slow cars driving around, What's the first thing you notice when you've done your music mode, you do a bit of driving, is the graphics. The graphics are looking smooth and fantastic throughout. I mean, there's wonderful textures and texture work. We'll look more at this when we look at car customization and painting your car, the liveries. You know, it is still mind-blowing the level of detail you can get when you zoom in. I'm happy to say as well that some of the various some tracks more than others, but some tracks have got really nice texture work now, where they were very bland in some of the early trailers. Some of them have had a lot more rubber and wear added to the circuits. It just gives it a more realistic feel. The detail on the track surface is such that this YouTube video does not do it justice. Doesn't matter if I'm running it in 4K, you know, maximum bit rate, you can't get the level of fidelity because the particles are so small, and when they're in motion, YouTube just doesn't cover it as well as seeing the real game. So there is really nice detail. If you've got a quality TV, OLED, 4K goodness, you're going to really see Gran Turismo pop, and it really pops. That's another thing as well. Recording this, whether it's HDR issues, whatever, for some reason Gran Turismo just looks so much better when it's actually running than it does when it's recorded. There's definitely something that's limited when you record it. There's a deadness to the lighting that is much more vibrant when it's running normally, and perhaps that is just the HDR. But either way, the visuals are slightly dulled down in terms of the videos I've got recorded here, as good as they look as well. So you go out in your slow rubbish car and you drive a fair few races, but for me, I wanted to get stuck into a time trial. And when you go to time trials or the circuit challenge, you immediately get put into a faster car, and just to see what Gran Turismo is all about. And this takes us then to another moment, another impression of Gran Turismo straight away. What's changed? The physics. The physics are a world different to where we've been so far. The car, the way it responds to the track surface, the way it responds to curbs, the way the tyres affect the car, the way temperatures affect the car. There is a lot more detail. It's funny, you'll play Gran Turismo Sport, well no, you'll play Gran Turismo 7, then go back to Gran Turismo Sport, and you'll see huge differences to the type of handling now. There's a lot more depth. You need to be smooth now, really smooth, to get the most out of your car a lot of the time. You know, really understanding the tyres you've got on the car, how aggressive you can be on those tyres. There's a lot more weight transfer now. So if you lose the car a little bit, the weight will move around a bit more, and you need to be quick with your reactions on the wheel to rescue the car should it start to come out from underneath you. You'll be braking at a similar point to an extent, but you'll need a lot more balance on the throttle getting through the corners. The car is more easily unsettled now as well. You'll be seeing, and quite often I'm using traction control in the sports cars, because when you turn off traction control, the cars can become very unsettled very easily, especially with direction changes. Now, when you think about traction control traditionally, you'll be thinking of acceleration off the line, or acceleration out of slow corners where you can spin up, or perhaps even just general, where there's a torque curve and where you put your foot down and the rear wheels spin and get away from you. But that's not so much the issue with traction control here. One of the issues with traction control is bumps and curbs, and you can go on a curb and that can unsettle the car just enough to spin you out. And without traction control, it's cheerio. So you will have to learn the circuits, you will have to learn how the bumps affect the car, but generally speaking, the difference between traction control on and off really depends on if the real car has traction control. And a lot of real sports cars at the higher level do have traction control these days, and that enables you to lean a lot more on the throttle, lean on the tyres and car a lot more than you would have previously, because you're sort of tippy-toeing round. Yes, you'll get that ultimate level of traction if you're that controlled with your foot, but that's not the issue. The issue really tends to be those little curbs here and there that can just bump, little crests in the road, off camber corners, and suddenly your rear wheels are spinning up. And at the moment they spin up, you've got an option. You can back off the throttle, you can run some opposite lock into the car very quickly. Sometimes you can save it, sometimes depending on the tyres you're using, if it's harder tyres, sometimes the grip just doesn't come back to you, but you can fight it all the way around. Suffice to say, that if you're aggressive with the car and the wheel, you can still wrestle your car on the way around the circuit, but there is a lot of challenge now that is on a level that wasn't in the game before. Huge changes to the physics, a big surprise. The next thing that the initial running gave me as well on Largo Maggiore was the changes to the course. There are changes to the crests and cambers on the older courses. So if you're coming back to Gran Turismo Sport courses, we may see some subtle changes throughout all of them, and I've not been on all of them, but there definitely seems to be more surface texture detail on the force feedback and various changes to the various undulation and elements throughout the course. Curbs have been changed, some have been changed into sausage curbs, some have been lowered. Refinement after years of Gran Turismo, especially with the new physics engine, so your lines are quite similar on the main, but at the same time the way you control your throttle, your aggression will really depend on your tyres and the way they work on the circuits. So big changes to the physics, a lot more detail. This is a much closer simulation, and it's much more one that the PC simulation aficionados will get a lot more from. This is a big step forward. It's quite surprising. Of course, I've not tested it on the PS4 to see if there's any difference, but I wouldn't expect there will be. Suffice to say, so far so good, very impressive, and it meant learning how to drive Gran Turismo all over again. When you're driving in different cars, I've tried in different cars in different conditions. Obviously they have their own nuances. Some cars are easier to drive than others, but most of the top cars can be spun out. Even when you have level 5 traction control, you can still spin out at any time. So the traction control system doesn't save you in the main, but it is a support that enables you to be a little bit more committed and not just tippy-toeing around so many of the different courses. So what have we got then? We've got a massive game, we've got much improved physics, and as well as the new courses that have been added, which we'll look at in a moment, we've got improvements to the older courses that are there. Besides a retexture, they've actually done some slight remodeling, as well as a retexture and a different vibe and different detail to it as well. Now moving on, we have the wet weather conditions that have been added. Now my first experience of wet weather, we have a few different, as you progress through the game, you'll start to encounter some of the wet weather and how that affects the car, how the car slides in different conditions. One of the most challenging races I encountered was a two-part race, where the second race was I was on hard dry tyres, sport tyres, and it was raining, so I had to tippy-toe round the first lap, but on the second lap the rain stopped. So the track would swiftly start to dry. It gave a good example of how the drying line worked very well, but you will need to know where each track gathers water, so know where those puddles are. If you hit a puddle, the car will aquaplane and you'll be straight off the circuit. Most of the time I was feathering the throttle. In the wet conditions there's no grip at all, and you're slowing down more and more and more, and it's very, very tricky. You can literally feel the car getting away from you. When the car starts to get away from you in wet conditions, if you're on dry tyres, there's no saving it, so you just have to take it slower and slower, and you generally get a feel in the car. It communicates well where it is, but of course if you go very fast you're likely to hit a puddle, or the aquaplaning just increases under the car and then you're just a passenger, you'll be flying off the circuit. But if you can hang in there till it starts to dry out, you'll begin to feel that grip, and the subtlety of grip change from dry to wet is fantastic. The way it's handled, you really do feel it. But I can tell you, I'm feeling it, I'm understanding it, and I'm getting more out of the car as well. So progressing through. Now I was talking a bit more, like you say, you've got various tracks that seem a bit worn, and Tsukuba's in there as well, and obviously drifters are going to love that. And that's one of those circuits as well that has a nice worn feeling to it. I like that. Good to see various tracks getting that, as I say, that remodel treatment and that brush of extra detail as well. So you progress through the various menus in the cafe, unlocking various elements and tracks, and then eventually you get tasks where it unlocks other parts of the game. It will unlock the license tests. So the license tests are back, and we all love a good old license test. For me, licenses are a big part of Gran Turismo. I hadn't done a license test in a game before Gran Turismo. I remember playing them, and then when you get that silver, you want to get the gold. And you know, it's an OCD, dare I say it, in Gran Turismo. Many expert players or just racing gamers in general will know once you start to get the golds, you want to get all of the golds. And if you get all of the golds, you get extra cars as well. So before making this video today, I went through the B, A, International B, International A and completed them all on gold. Thankfully, though I'm still a work in progress on the final challenge of the Super License. Oh my goodness. Right, so the challenges all move up into you know, you have various Gran Turismo champions that appear, world champions that appear to give you advice. Some of those faces we know very well. Good to see all these guys in there, and they give you bits of advice along the way. But either way, the demonstration is helpful, and there's also a demonstration on how to complete those licenses. However, I did find that when I was driving some of them, I would tend to do it in a slightly different gear. I'd have a slightly different approach. So they show you an approach. They give you an idea on the line, especially when sometimes it can be a bit confusing as to how the hell am I going to get that time. But in the main, getting the gold gets tougher and tougher and tougher. Some are easier than others. Some are so hard they took me forever. But I got there in the end. I did it all in one sitting. And that was a fair amount of driving, and I'll be doing it all again on a stream. So if you're enjoying what you're seeing so far, I'll be streaming this live tomorrow from 11 o'clock in the morning. You'll be able to see me racing Gran Turismo from the very beginning. I'll be deleting my game save, saying cheerio to the million so credits I've had so far and all of my cars, and starting it all over again. But I don't mind, because I've enjoyed what I've done so far. Though I have to admit, the tests are going to be driving around the bend. The tests will be coming up on the channel as a separate video for each test. So if you're looking forward to that, I'll be discussing all of those in more detail there. So as we keep on unlocking, one of the next aspects is the scapes mode is back. The various photo mode and scapes mode. Again, subtle improvements to it. Create wonderful photographs. One of the key aspects here is the ray tracing. The car models in the main look incredible, has to be said. They just look amazing. It's so impressive to see not just the cars, but the car interiors, the textures, the elements that make up those cars, the perfections and imperfections in them. Wonderfully modeled throughout the game, and the photo mode is, you know, it's just lush in the way it's all put together now. The scapes are tremendous. There's animated scapes and everything else that you'll see as you go through the game. Wonderful. So this again, there's a tutorial that takes you all the way through the scapes mode, everything you've got to do there, all the different camera options for those of you who are used to it and those of you who are not used to it, and work your way from there. So we've opened up a fair bit. Just one point I'll mention on that license. I will just mention on the licenses that the whole review to an extent is spoilers, but the final license is the toughest in the game. It's the toughest GT license I've ever come up against, and it's driving, I think it's an old Porsche in the wet, and it is wow, it is something else. It is something else to drive an old sports car in changing wet conditions on racing hard tires is so difficult. I can't even tell you. I love Spa. I've done thousands of laps of Spa. The amount of restarts I needed just to get the car around the course was unbelievable, because you'll be racing round, you'd come across a puddle, and then that would send you straight off into the bushes, and you needed to know exactly where the sunlight was to know where the various dryish parts of the track were. The water would drag the car off the course, so sometimes I was racing offline because the way the cambers would pull the car in certain directions, and once the car started at high speed moving in that direction, you couldn't pull it across because the layer of water underneath the wheels would start to drag the car in that direction. So this was pure hell, but it will be amazing for online racing, and I think that's going to be great fun. I think online racing with the weather, when we can test that, is going to be very impressive indeed. So great to see that. As you progress through the game, then you've done all your licenses. As you progress through the cafe and you unlock more elements, you'll unlock more of the World Series, you'll unlock more cars, you'll unlock the car parts store, and we'll take a look in there as well. Car parts store, this is obviously a key part of Gran Turismo. Get your car, upgrade it, give it the parts, make it better, or make your car eligible for more races as you go through the game. There's always a lot of toing and froing, going from the race back to the car, back to the race, tuning the parts. When you first look at the car tuning screen, it is quite frankly overwhelming. You look at all these numbers and you think, my goodness, that's overwhelming. But over the course of playing, you will gradually get your head around it. And for me, I looked at it and thought, my goodness, I'm not a tuner and this looks quite scary. However, once I'd put all the parts on, I needed to activate and deactivate certain parts to make my cars eligible for certain races. This is a key part of the understanding of Gran Turismo, and you will need to put some time into it, but it is wonderful seeing all the parts there, adding them to the car. Lots you can do, and there is a feeling about taking a car, changing some parts on it and making it better. That really feels great to do. And you say, my car's not quick enough, it can only come in 5th place, but if I put new tyres on, it will come in 4th. If I lighten the weight, it will come in 3rd. If I had a bit of suspension, it will come in 2nd. If I push really hard, I can come in 1st just with that. And it's about doing as little to your car as possible sometimes, just to get through those races, but also maximising your own driving and ability. Staying on that subject of tuning, as you progress through the game, you'll unlock the sport mode. Gran Turismo Sport is back in sport mode, and it's all pretty much as we left it before. Obviously the layout of the screens has changed. Set your qualifying time, jump in, do a race. At the point of doing this video, I've not had a chance to race online because the racing sessions are quite limited, but I will be racing online before this video goes up, and I'll add another video looking more at the online racing. So online, I did the online qualifying, but I noticed on the online qualifying I was a long way off the pace. Initially I put that down to the car and I was racing around Deep Forest and I was saying, goodness, I'm a long way off, but I improved my time by 2 seconds. Then I changed my engine performance bit by bit, increased my engine performance to the limit, and eventually from where I was 7 seconds off the #1 time, I was eventually under 1 second off the #1 time, and finding more time all the time. What's quite interesting is when you're doing qualifying mode is the time of day changes. It's a very subtle time of day change, but you'll see that the lighting alter as you race from the day into the night. I'd really be interested to understand the physics data that comes into effect when it comes to the overall tarmac changing in temperature, that effect on the tyres, air temperature changes on the car. It'd be interesting to know what effect all of that has, and whether you can get optimum times during the day or during the night, depending on how well lit the course is and how well you know the course in terms of air temperature and general ambient elements. So improve my time, and that was from just going back to the shop, understanding what parts I needed, or just simply tuning bits on the